So welcome to the third class meeting of Storytelling with Data. Nice to see you all again. Today we'll be giving and receiving feedback on the stories you submitted last night. Before we dig in, though, I have a few things to say to help focus our discussion today. So first of all, great job on your stories. Really enjoyed hearing them and seeing your approaches to this assignment. I hope you also enjoyed it and seeing each other's stories. I thought we could start off by spending a few minutes discussing any overarching themes you noticed that were common across several of your and your classmates' stories. So like, without getting into specific stories quite yet, maybe you noticed particular styles or approaches that you thought were particularly effective or ineffective, or like, well, all of your stories were kind of autobiographical things, but did certain themes or resonate especially well with you or fail to resonate with you? What stands out for you? Any comments there?
I was having a lot of trouble downloading some of the stories. Like my computer took a very long time, so I was only able to watch one or two of them.
Okay. Okay, well, that's a very practical thing. So I'll put all the stories on YouTube. The way I do it is with an unlisted link so that you can't search for them, but you'll all have access. So
thank you.
Okay, so if you haven't, well, so I guess feedback on stories that you haven't seen won't be useful, but to you today, so I'm sorry. Did anyone else have trouble viewing the stories, or?
I didn't know that we were supposed to view the stories. Sorry.
Didn't know that we were supposed to. Okay.
I watched the recording from Wednesday though, so if your stories didn't change too much, maybe I could give feedback from that, but sorry.
Okay. Well, so if you weren't able to watch the stories yet, maybe you could upload some thoughts, take some, or, I'll take notes about your comments that you say today. But, if you're able to, once you're able to watch the movies, any thoughts you have or notes on the different stories, it'd be helpful to share them with your classmates. So I'd encourage you to do that once you're able to watch them. For those of you who were able to watch other stories, did you have any like takeaways from kind of the collective set, or?
This is kind of basic, but I feel like a lot of our stories had sort of something where like you learn something about yourself, or like the main character learned something about themselves. And I think that was like sometimes my favorite part of people's stories, kind of seeing like how they grew from like X experience and like how it's kind of shaped who they are now.
Cool. Yeah, so kind of personal growth themes you find effective. Cool.
Something I found, this wasn't for all of them, like it wasn't so much for mine, but just how like little unexpected events can like really, I don't know, like either drastically shift like how we view ourselves or the world, or like something big like especially like Kira's and Nathan's and Hannah's all had to do with like some kind of train or car accident or something like that, like things you can't anticipate, and how like they can bring you closer together, like in Hannah's story, or just kind of just learning lessons that like you wouldn't have anticipated learning.
Yeah, that's cool. So some element of surprise kind of enhanced the stories for you. Yeah, that's a great observation. Along those same lines, like something where I thought you were going with your comment originally was like a lot of you inserted kind of quirky details along the way. So like well, I guess we'll get into specifics when we discuss your specific stories, but I liked that. I thought that was really effective. I found that really effective. Sometimes like including, it's tricky because you don't want to include too much extraneous detail because that can be distracting, but like finding the right balance of how much additional detail to include can really like make the story kind of connect more and seem more interesting and also more real. It's like, you know, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. So like it can kind of evoke that sense of like, oh, it must be true because you're including this weird detail. And so kind of our brains often interpret like additional detail as evidence of, you know, truth or believability. And so that can help build credibility with your audience. Cool. What about like on the illustration end, like some of you used like, you kind of had a wide variety. So like anything from like, you know, photos on the internet, like kind of stock photos or memes, to like photographs from the actual event seemingly, to like drawings. There's some different drawing styles. What did you find effective there, or like, you know, what worked or didn't work for you?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I was actually gonna comment on
Nathan
yours.
and then Hannah.
I was gonna comment on yours, Hannah. Like that was one of the ones I got to see, and I really liked the whole like drive. I thought that was like pretty cool that you filmed it like that. I'm not sure when you filmed that.
I
Oh,
didn't
you,
film that. I
oh,
got that on the internet.
okay, that's it.
I was wondering, okay.
But yeah, that, and then also like the news clip I thought was cool that you like added in. And I thought that had like a good effect and mixing it up, and also kind of added into like the drama of like what your story and like the good adjective words you use to like keep me interested the whole time.
Nathan, that was funny because I was about to comment on yours, how I liked the calendar. I mean, Nathan's is the only one I saw, to be fair, because it was on YouTube. But I liked like the calendar and how you like took us back to that date, and like a lot of it was like on your computer, and I thought that was like really cool because it was like walking us kind of through your day as you would have seen it.
Thanks. Yeah, I made a lot of use out of the screen recording option for mine.
So I want to dig into your individual stories in a sec, but like, did you, yeah, so I also found those things really effective. There, I think like different kind of visual styles like kind of evoked different things for me. So with the kind of realist, so like the kind of meme approach is, it kind of added humor to me, which is nice. Then there's like the photo like montage or like time lapses, particularly in Hannah's story. Like, you know, that added a neat element of like, oh wow, it's like we're actually going through this event. Then, you know, Nathan you had some really slick animations, like that was cool. I also really liked the Kira and Isha, like you both had really cool quirky drawing styles that I thought like added a really fun element to both of your stories. And yeah, I liked the mix of approaches you used, and yeah, I think, you know, I guess moving forward, you know, viewing, once everyone has a chance to view each other's videos, you know, think about what different styles evoke in terms of like how you're connecting with your audience. There's not like a, I don't think one style is like inherently better than another style, but you could think about like what message are you conveying with your style, with the style that you do choose. And, you know, you can imagine different styles under different circumstances could, you know, be a better or worse fit for the message you're trying to convey. So it's something to think about. Okay. All right, so let's see. So I think we have officially until, what 2:15. So, maybe we'll take like 45, 50 minutes. So we have 5 stories, so maybe 10-ish minutes max per story we'll take to discuss. And I thought maybe we could just, you could each do like a 10-second reminder of what your story is about so that we, get reminded. And then, anyone who has feedback, I want to give you a chance to weigh in. And then also if you want to ask questions of the class about your story, this is an opportunity to do that too. I also, I wrote down kind of a list of potential questions that you don't have to necessarily answer these questions, but I'll paste them into the chat in case you find them useful to help orient. Kira, you mentioned you need to leave early also, so I thought we could maybe start with your story.
Yeah, that'd be great. I
Yeah.
have to leave in like 10 minutes to get my vaccine to bring
Okay.
but
Super important, yeah.
Yeah, so quick overview of my story. It's basically about me taking the train back up to Dartmouth, and it gets in an accident, and so it's sort of my journey trying to get back to campus and eventually giving in and asking a friend for help even though I didn't want to. Oh, and at the end we realized that it wasn't a big deal to ask anyways because they weren't really actually doing as much as I thought.
Cool. Yeah. So, what's your feedback? What did you think about the story? What did you like? What didn't you like? What worked well? What didn't work well? What are some directions you could go in? What do you think?
I thought it was just like the way you told it was really relatable. Like I could really see myself thinking the same things that you did. So I really connected to that, and I liked that a lot. I could feel what you were feeling.
What do you think kind of conveyed that, or how did you think that? Where do you think that connection came from?
Just how she explained what was going through her head. I think you said blah blah blah, this happened, so he must think this, and I also would have come to the same conclusion. So that's kind of where that came from.
So kind of taking us through the logic and okay, here's my frame of mind, here's how I'm thinking about it, and this is how I responded, and okay, that makes sense to me, so that helps you to kind of relate. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, going off of that, I love that interplay of what you said and what you were really thinking. It was oh, are you you want food? Are you hungry? And you're oh no, I'm fine. But you're yeah, really, I was starving. That was very, very relatable. And in terms of I guess suggestions. I mean, I really liked your story. I thought your pictures were actually really cute. And
Thank you.
I don't know, I liked them. But so I knew from the workshop of kind of what conclusion you were getting towards, but I would maybe think about introducing that element of not wanting to bother someone a little bit sooner in, and also kind of build some of that tension, because I mean, getting in a train crash and having to go back to school, there's a lot of tension, and feeling that a little more I think can help with the emotional aspect of the story.
Yeah, definitely.
So are you thinking, Amelia, maybe something early on in the story, it's maybe getting on the train, you have to maybe there's not a full open seat, but 2 people, I don't know, where someone has their bag on the seat or something, maybe do you ask them to move, kind of setting that up, or?
Yeah, I mean, that could be, or I was thinking more introducing this idea of wanting to call someone and being no, I don't want to bother them, blah blah blah, because I know that's so relatable, as so many times I'm think of asking someone something and I keep not doing it, and then I end up asking them in the end you did, and it's oh my gosh, I could have saved so much time, turmoil, and you get there at the end, but I don't know, kind of giving some foreshadowing of that, like right away saying like, I wanted to call someone, but like didn't want to bother or something like that.
Yeah. Now that you say that, I feel like I could have said something about like earlier about like when all the other people's families were coming to get them. I could have been like,
Yeah,
should
because
I
you
try?
introduce
Yeah.
that later, like retrospectively, like, oh, like all the other families, but maybe at that time, because that just kind of plants the seed and gets that emotion kind
Yeah.
of running.
That's a good idea.
I really liked how this might have already been said, but how like the pictures were cut out, and I thought that was like just like a unique art style that I haven't seen before, and it gave like it was just interesting in that of itself, even if you weren't even saying anything, but you were saying stuff too.
Thank
and
you.
and yeah, I thought you did a good job too of like the character, and I thought like you could see like her different emotions visually, and then also like with what you were saying.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually did the cutouts because it took me a while to draw each scene. I didn't want to have to redo it, but I'm glad it was effective.
It was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I agreed. I thought that was a really clever approach to like avoid needing to redraw like major repeated elements, and it also was a cool visual style. So you had like that one thing where you like flip a smile to a frown, and
Yeah.
like that was just like that was perfect. Really, I mean, all the cutouts were fun, but that was my favorite. Like that stood out as a favorite. To just like, yeah, it was just such a cool animation there.
Thanks.
Having not seen this video yet, I just like had a couple of thoughts because of like what Amelia said about like maybe introducing that idea earlier. I felt like in mine, I was struggling because most of my story was like inside my own head, if that makes sense. It wasn't like there was like a element that was external events, but most of it was like my own turmoil and like the growth from that. And like I wasn't able to workshop with you guys, but I did show this to like one of the girls who was like kind of involved. Like it was her boyfriend I was in the car with. And she was like, oh, you should say earlier that like you and Sam weren't talking about anything serious, and kind of like setting that scene to like then show the growth a little bit more. So like I feel like that's kind of what Professor Manning was saying, like about maybe adding an element of not wanting to move the bag on the seat or whatever. And then the other thing was I wish I could draw, because that sounds like a really cool way of showing like the emotions, because I was having the hardest time like portraying emotions without being able to like, I don't know, draw at all. And like the flipping of the smile, I thought that was that sounds like a cool element. I'm excited to watch.
Thank you. I will say they're not very high level drawings, but
I think the style really worked. Like it sometimes works better when they're kind of rough and not and like kind of quirky. I think that that worked. Since I know you have to go like in a minute, so I just want to make sure to get some of my comments out there too. So let's see, some other observations I had. I thought like you did a nice job adding kind of those like extra details that added depth and context. So like you mentioned having like a feeling of peace after having your homework done. I could definitely relate to that. Settling in to like relax and watch a fun movie. Oh, you still there? Yeah.
sorry, my Wi-Fi just cut out.
No worries. And like the beautiful night in New England, like I thought those were great details. And then I thought you did a nice job setting up the Scott character, like, tension around asking him for a ride, and like it's an important night for him. You've only known him for a few months. There were a few pieces that like I didn't quite follow the logic. So like related to Scott driving down, like he could have said no. So like there's, I mean, I hate asking people for help too. So I definitely related to that. But then as like a viewer, I felt like there was a question for me, like it felt like there were the like tension around he's already there, but you're like kind of I don't know, for now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm like, okay, well, I could see myself feeling that, but like when I was watching it, it didn't totally connect for me. I don't know where that came from exactly. And then the other thing that I like didn't totally work for me was like you ended, like your conclusion was essentially you asked for help more. And like I think the intended message was like you overcame this personal challenge of feeling uncomfortable asking for help, and that's like that's super important. But then like the wording you use, like I asked for many rides and favors, it didn't quite communicate to me like what I thought the missing piece might be, which is like I think you're like my guess from the rest of the story is like perhaps you're still uncomfortable asking for help, but like you've realized you can't do everything on your own, or like something to that effect.
Yeah,
I thought maybe that framing might have come off as like, I mean, it doesn't sound like you're like mooching off people and always asking for, but like there is like some kind of hint of that in the phrasing, which knowing the context of the workshop and the rest of your story, like, you know, I don't think that's the case, but like it just like something about that last wording didn't quite work for me. But like overall, awesome job with this. And let's see what else. I also loved how you like maintained a positive and upbeat narrative throughout, like your kind of voice throughout. And like that's hard to do when you're like telling a growth journey. Sometimes it's hard to strike that balance between like self-criticism and then like, you know, you included a good amount of detail for the audience to follow along and feel connected to the characters, and, you know, had a nice flow to your stories. Great job overall. I know you have to go, so.
Yeah, so sorry I can't stay, but.
Nathan, you can add your comment if you had another comment. You can say it, and then, you know, it can be on the recording. Kira, don't feel like you have to stay, but you. Okay.
No, I will.
I just had a question, kind of, and it's more like just general for the class. But I was wondering for fiction or not nonfiction stories, do the conclusions being made by like someone necessarily need to be fully like understood or even logical, or even like being set up by the story necessarily? I guess that's an opinion.
Not for this assignment, I would say. Like this assignment is totally freeform, so
yeah,
I guess
or I'm
not
just like
in the strictest sense.
Or
but
if you're telling a compelling story, like are your thoughts that the most compelling stories are one that that the conclusion that the conclusion seems like is like kind of like is understood by the audience?
That's generally helpful. I mean, there's some movie directors do a really effective job of like, you know, make a confusing story, and that causes the audience to have to think about it more. Like not being able to process fully in the moment can be a nice way of like having it stick in your mind. So that can be a way of like connecting, or like, you know, getting your movie to live rent free in the audience's mind, so to speak. But for and so that could be effective for this assignment. I think for data stories moving forward, well, I don't know. It's often trickier to use more abstract tools like that, but I could see like, you know, if some data set or pattern is ambiguous, like that could be an interesting thing. And like, I guess your conclusion doesn't always have to, there are no rules, like your conclusion doesn't have to flow directly from what you say previously, but it's also important to like unless it's an artistic choice, generally it's a good idea to like have your story flow in a followable way. Otherwise, the audience might feel lost.
Okay, gotcha.
So if
Yeah.
losing the audience is your goal, then that might
Yeah.
be a good thing. But
There you go. Yeah.
yeah,
I think that's it. I agree.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Who else would like to? Who wants to go next? Okay, Amelia.
Might as well.
Guinea pig story. Yeah. Do you want to do like a 10-second summary or?
Right. So yeah, basically like my avid pursuit of getting this guinea pig was really more about this battle of wills against my dad. And in kind of going through the process, I learned a lot about just like stubbornness and just kind of knowing when to let something go and when to keep fighting for something based on like, I guess the outcomes, as well as just kind of thinking through things more like when I'm trying to prove myself or get my way, like is it really worth it or not?
Yeah, cool. So what were people's reactions?
Sorry, I was
sorry.
talking over you, but I was just gonna say I watched the recording from last class, and I don't know what the result of your story was, but it sounded super interesting. I really loved how you chose a story where like there was a narrative happening at like the surface level, but like deeper, there was actually like a much stronger theme, like related to like the tension of maybe like you wanting to grow up or you wanting to tell your dad like you're responsible enough to have this guinea pig. It just makes me think of like that iceberg metaphor, like just what you see on the top is very little, but there's like so much deeper underneath. And I just think it was like a really good story to choose because it not only seemed like interesting at the surface level, but it had like a lot of depth underneath that you wouldn't initially think. So yeah, I just wanted to say it sounded cool.
Thank you.
Did you incorporate more like, sorry, Nathan, every time. Did you incorporate more narrative like about your dad after the like workshop session? Because I remember you being like hesitant to talk about it.
Yeah, I decided to go like kind of the different route and have it more be on me, I guess, but like just me like trying to prove myself, like not just to my, I guess, dad. I mean, in this case it was, but just in general, that lesson of proving myself. So yeah, I didn't dive much deeper into my dad specifically.
Gotcha. I find that interesting how like the story on the surface level, like just telling it like as a sequence of events was the original idea. And then like as you were explaining it to us, there was clearly like a lot more to it. And if like talking through it helped you like kind of come to that, that's cool.
I really liked your beginning. I thought it was very successful in like the way like I think like what you were going for, and it was like an interesting approach how you were asking questions and like about the feelings in the beginning, and then like all of a sudden like I didn't really know if I was because I already kind of knew the story since you told it last class, but if I was watching it for the first time, I'd be kind of like, oh, like where is she going with this? And then all of a sudden you said your dad, and I thought that was like a nice kind of moment where yeah, like a moment where kind of caught me off guard, which I thought was cool.
At which point, like when I just say it was my dad who said no, or
Like when you, because you didn't like start off by like saying this is a story about my dad, like which I guess you could have done, or this is a story about my dog or raising my dad, but you kind of like you started the story off with some provoking like questions and asking about.
oh,
Is that right? Am I like thinking of?
yeah, no, yeah. I asked like 3 questions after, like the very beginning.
Yeah, I thought that was like a good like hook, you know?
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you.
I also really like how you decided to conclude it. I know like you were having trouble coming up with ways to end a story, and I thought that like that little summary of how everything went and then like your final thoughts was a really good way to wrap it all up.
Thanks. Okay, I'm glad because that was definitely, yeah, like last class, I was worried about like having it come together and having there be some kind of cohesive takeaway.
Yeah, I liked how I let's see. I thought it was a cute story overall, like, you know, stubborn kid versus stubborn parent shenanigans sorts of things. And then like, I like the twist, like kid wins in the end, but did they really win? Yeah, like good, good plot. And then I also liked how you like explained your process. So like, you know, working through the details, like you included details about like, okay, I made a logical argument to my dad, but that didn't work. And then contractually, like I was able to do this. And so like that sequence like enabled you to win, so to speak. And then, yeah, I thought your visuals were great, like well chosen. One thing that I like I didn't totally connect with the narrator in this version. I felt like I connected more with the narrator character in your previous version, actually. And I was trying to figure out where that was coming from. But like, I wonder if it would have been useful to contextualize the dad's perspective a little bit more. Like, why was he so anti-pet, and like, where did his neat streak come from, and why did he reject the logic-based arguments, or like, what was that about, and like, how did that fit into your relationship, and that, or like even some like additional kind of detail, or I mean, I know your story was like, it's hard to cram everything into 5 minutes. So like, but
I took all those lines out because I was like, oh, I mean, I guess because, and this is like why I love feedback so much, because it's like, it makes sense to me in my brain, obviously, because I lived it, but like the people who obviously aren't living in my head, like what are the confusing points? So I think I can elaborate more on that. And that was something I was, wanting feedback on as well. I put in my reflection is just, the narrative style. And if I should, I don't know, how I can kind of convey that journey and that conflict more with like, I don't know, like my voice or with specific words or even with like an image.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that there's a universal solution there, but I thought kind of my thought was like, one way of doing that would be more contextualizing. So like other kind of little vignettes of other interactions, or like past times of your dad being unreasonable, or like maybe he was traumatized by a pet as a child and like that's why he doesn't like pets, or like where, like I wanted to kind of understand that more, like how do you interact with your dad, or it doesn't have to be true to life. So it could be like, how does the narrator interact with the dad character? And then also like in the lessons learned side, like I think elaborating on that might have also helped with the connection. So like maybe describing like some other situation where like you show like, okay, the lessons learned causally influenced your behavior. And so like the next time you behave differently, or it could be a humor thing where like, yep, next thing I knew I was getting a dog, and like, something like that. And then you didn't get a dog.
Never. Nope.
And then, I thought the visuals worked well, as I said. And then I really liked your ending about like potty training guinea pigs. That was a nice last line. I thought that was.
I just had to have that in there somewhere. That was just a very essential element of my time with Oreo.
Yeah, like it was just like in one sentence, it was like, I mean, I'm in the process of potty training a child. So like I definitely, I mean, that resonated for me, but then I was like, yeah, that's difficult to do. And I imagine not being able to talk could be extra challenging. Cool. All right. Let's see. Yeah, any other comments on Amelia's story?
Just like if you were like struggling with like the time thing, getting it under 5 minutes. One part that I think could have been a little bit shorter might have been like the part where you talked about like how you were going to finance the guinea pig. Like obviously like in the moment that was a really big part of your story, like explaining it all to your dad. But I think that if you had like condensed it a little bit, it still would have made sense to all the listeners of the story, and you would have had time to like put in extra details that like maybe enhance like the emotional part of it.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I really appreciate that because I was like, I was watching the time go and I just tried to talk really quickly the last few
Yeah,
sentences and I got it like 4:58.
yeah, I was the exact same.
Yeah.
So
Okay, thank you.
One trick, I don't know if I know how to do this on a Mac, but I don't know if you are on Macs, but in iMovie, you might be able to do this in QuickTime also, but you can have, if your video is a little over, you can like speed it up a tiny bit, and generally it doesn't look so crazy. I've
I
definitely used
recorded
that
a
trick.
voiceover and like for every clip I did, I probably cut out like 10 seconds of pauses that were like unnecessary or whatever. That just like happen when you're naturally speaking. So you can kind of just clip out some of the audio too to make it shorter.
Yeah, so tricks of the trade, yeah. Okay, cool. So yeah, who would like to go next? Or sorry, any other feedback on Amelia's story? It sounded like we were wrapping up there, but okay, yeah, yeah, nice job with that, Amelia. Who would like to go next?
I can go.
Okay.
My story was like literally a week ago. I was driving back up to campus, and I had just been in snowbird skiing with my best friend, her boyfriend, and like a couple other friends. And it turned out with the travel plans home that it was just me and my best friend's boyfriend, Sam, in the car from the Logan airport to school. And yeah, we saw like this kind of crazy scene with like two kids running up the side of the road on the highway. And it was like just kind of like a spooky minute because it was like that post-rain fog type of situation, and we saw a bunch of brake lights up ahead and like a ton of people had pulled over, and all of a sudden the traffic was really slow, and we thought it was a car crash, but it wasn't. And I think the majority of my story is like inside my own head, like the crazy kind of thoughts that I had and the irrational ones. And I thought like I was kind of like judging myself for thinking that. Like I was like, don't think that, that's ridiculous. Like you're being ridiculous. And then it turned out that he was kind of thinking the same thing. And me and this kid have like nothing in common, like that you would see from the outside. So I think that like that was kind of like eye-opening to me, that someone who I don't really know that well, haven't spent that much time with, wouldn't expect to think like I did. And I think kind of moral a little bit was like I wouldn't have ever said anything. Like he had to kind of be the vulnerable one for me to realize that. And yeah, I wish I'd been like a little bit more like, I don't know, kind of shameless about my anxieties in that moment. Put them out there a bit more, because it turns out I wasn't alone. But yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. So what feedback do you all have for Hannah?
I really liked your story. I think it's super relatable, especially like how you set it up at the beginning. Like it's always weird when it's that mutual friend and like the mutual friend leaves and it's like awkward. Like I've seen so many TikToks about that, and so I really liked that. And I thought in terms of like your storytelling style and your visuals, I thought those were super effective because like I felt the puzzlement build like just as you were puzzled in the moment. And so like I felt that I was curious. I'm like, what's happening? And I loved like your fog transition was super cool. And then having those like news clips like really brought us into your moment and like what you were thinking and experiencing and feeling. So and then yeah, I mean I really did like it. And the conclusion to kind of, it's like you never really know what someone else has gone through. It's like, I don't know. Everyone has different ways of expressing emotions. Like during the time you're like, he seemed so unfazed, but really it's like, you know, like weird events like that have a way of like bringing people closer sometimes. And I really like that message.
Did you mind like the black screens? Because sometimes I couldn't find like an adequate visual to like represent how I was feeling. So I just went like black screen to focus on the words more. Was that like off-putting?
Yeah.
What did you
I
think?
mean, I like when there's a visual because it's like, it definitely helps with the story. But then when I was thinking about it, it was also kind of like darkness because you were uncertain of what was going on. And so when I thought about it more, I was like, it makes sense. Like, because I couldn't think of a visual to put in there. Like,
Okay.
I was like,
I'm glad you got that because I didn't know if anyone was gonna like understand why there were black screens or gray screens in there.
I totally agree with Amelia, and I really like the it was like very insightful and definitely like a moment where we all like relate to, um and yeah, I think it's like cool because it's like kind of like your psychology, and that's like what I assume like a lot of us are interested in, so I thought it was a good choice. Just a while, I guess.
Yeah. We already touched on this, but yeah, I thought the visual, your visuals overall were great. I really like the time lapse stuff. Yeah, and I agree. The fog moving into sunlight sequence, that was great. And the like splicing in news clips was really effective. You had a few lines that stood out to me. In the beginning, like we loved the same person in reference to like the narrator's best friend. That was a nice way of saying it, and like just like a lot of depth in that phrase. And then you also had the sequence where you were kind of describing, like, I mean, the thoughts that you just described is crazy. Although, like, it sounds like I'm not alone here. It sounds like a lot of us relate to these sorts of thoughts. But I wanted to duck. I want to get out of there. I thought that was just such a nice way of kind of describing those feelings. It's like, it's hard to make like kind of irrational thoughts relatable, but I thought your phrasing there, like navigate, like, you know, threaded the needle. I don't know. I don't know the right wording for it, but you did a nice job of that. Like kind of giving us insights into the narrator's state of mind. And then at the end, like you went from being friendly to being friends. Like that was a nice way of putting it too. So
I was like struggling as to whether or not I should include that line. It was in my original script, but then I didn't put it into the first video, and then I put it in to the final one because I felt like it was kind of cheesy, and I was like a little bit nervous about the fact that most of the narrative was inside my head already, and like that can be like you can kind of get lost in your own emotions and like write too emotionally, and like I've been doing a lot of like research manuscripts and stuff recently, and the main thing we've been focusing on is not writing emotionally. So it was like kind of challenging for me to like include emotion like that. So I definitely want feedback on like how that went, and if I did too much or too little.
I liked it. I think that emotion is like a critical element of storytelling. And I mean, I guess now that you say cheesy, like maybe I've heard it before, but I didn't think of it in a moment. Like I thought it was a really nice way of kind of encapsulating this experience and kind of bringing back to like, oh yeah, at the beginning, like it was just kind of through this mutual friend, and now you had actually something like to connect on. So I thought it was a good way of kind of bringing everything together.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also thought it worked. I mean, it's a succinct way of conveying kind of a complex sequence of thoughts and kind of way of thinking about social relationships. I thought it was good. Regarding your point about like kind of leaving emotion out of scientific writing, I think, I mean, the reason I start with this assignment in this class is I don't think that's actually always effective. Like even in scientific writing, like ultimately we are people trying to connect with other people. That's true of any storytelling style. You have to do that also with data stories. It's a little more subtle with data stories or scientific writing because like often, I mean, it's hard to, there are definitely papers that include kind of colloquial or like artsy or artistic licensed phrasing, but that's not the norm. But you still have to have theory of mind about your audience because, you want someone to find your analysis and your commentary interesting. And so that means asking the questions that someone else is going to ask. So like taking someone through the logic of how you thought about some scientific problem and, digging into the things you thought were interesting and that you think they are going to find interesting. Or like, what's the heart of this question from a scientific perspective? What do you think the most important issues are? So like, there's a lot of ties between like emotional storytelling and scientific writing or data storytelling that I think, I think it can be emotional and connect on an emotional level, even if it's supposed to be objective and unemotional. You can't really get away from the emotional piece because ultimately it's people reading it and they have emotions and thoughts and feelings.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm like pretty excited to work on in this class because like I've been submitting manuscripts with my research professor who's well, she's a woman and she talks a lot about like how being a woman in her industry, she feels like we need to be twice as cautious about like incorporating emotional writing because there's kind of like this bias to like see women as not, or like continuing to like keep the focus on the science. And I do like think that the most powerful scientific papers I've ever read have like a degree of emotion in them. But just like continuing to be like taken seriously in the field as like a young woman and still writing compelling papers is like a very interesting balance that I'm excited to work on, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's really good observation. I think there's definitely biases in the field, and it's not unique to psychology and neuroscience. It's true of many aspects of science. Still, I think ultimately the goal for everyone is to like convey your message in a compelling way to your audience. And like, it's true that how you do that may depend on like other people's perceptions of you. But that's something we'll work on in this class too. So we'll get there. But yeah, these are good things to think about. Okay, cool. Any other, let's see, any other things that I had? Just a few other comments I had on your story, Hannah. I thought your narrative voice, like your speaking style and your wordings, your descriptions of and like of what was happening around you and the setups to each scene. I thought you did a really nice job of that. Your message was clear, resonated for me. And I thought it was cool that you took like a relatively mundane like experience, like driving to campus and passing some cars with flashing lights And like, I thought you did a nice job turning that into a compelling kind of tidy story package. So, yeah, nice job at that.
Thank you.
Sure. Isha or Nathan, so we might not have time to get through both of your stories, so maybe we might have to pick up feedback on Monday. And Leah, that might also like give you a chance to submit your story, and then we can talk about that. And I know there are others who are joining asynchronously, so hopefully that'll give them a chance to submit their stories too. And I should also say, like, you know, from a, given all the like, we're all like kind of in different time zones, and like the world is crazy right now. So, you know, I think with this and other deadlines in the class, like, you know, if you, I mean, I think you all did a great job at this assignment, so I don't think anyone has to resubmit it. But if you wanted to resubmit something, I'm trying to strike a balance between like having the assignments ready for us to discuss and being fair to the class. So since not everyone submitted by today, I think if you didn't submit by today, we can also talk about this stuff on Monday. If you feel like you want to like redo some part of your story, you're welcome to do that. I don't think you have to for this assignment, but you know, I think that can carry throughout the class. I think deadlines can be a little bit flexible. The main constraint is that, you know, we want to be able to talk about stuff when it's like our day to give feedback on each other's stories, and that requires you submitting them in advance. And then second, we want to like make time for all the assignments, and the, you know, longer you delay on one assignment, the more compressed the others will be. So it's kind of a balance there. Okay, but so we probably have time for one more story, and then whoever doesn't go today, will do the other one on Monday, and then anyone else who submits. So Nathan or Isha, do either of you have a preference?
I can share, or do you want to go?
No, you got it.
Okay.
All right.
So I kind of told this story about me and my best friend in high school, and how we started growing apart just because we were busy with different things and weren't spending as much time together as we had been before. But somehow we both interpreted our time spent apart as like resentment towards each other, and that like our friendship was falling apart, whatever. Yeah, it was just kind of the story of like my feelings throughout that. And then the conclusion I kind of came to was that like once we talked it out, like we both understood that we weren't really mad at each other, and that we should have just talked earlier and there wouldn't have been a problem. So yeah, that was kind of like the big theme of my story and the overview of it.
Cool. Yeah. So what feedback do people have?
Well, like I said, like last time, I think I also think yours was like a very relatable and insightful story, definitely for me. And yeah, I thought you did like a good job with the voice, and then one thing I noticed too for the animation or the drawings, did you like animate some of them, and like were you using, how did you like draw? That's what I was wondering. How did you like draw them? Was it like online or on an iPad or something?
Yeah, I have an iPad, and I just did it like on the notes app in my iPad, like just like erasing things and drawing them over. But yeah, that was kind of it. They're not really good drawings, but
Have you heard of Procreate?
yes, I have heard of it.
Oh, you have
I don't
Procreate?
have
Okay.
it, but maybe I should look into. I don't have it, but maybe that's something I should
Procreate's
do
awesome.
instead.
I love Procreate, but yeah, those like
Yeah.
and yeah, I appreciate like the little animations like you added in. Were awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. The visuals were really fun. So they worked well. You had one scene where like you were, I think it was like your second drawing, you had like the kind of stick figures in front of the high school, and then you zoomed in to show like your kind of BFF sequence. I like that. I like that sequence. That worked really well.
Thanks.
Yeah, what else? What did you find like relatable or not relatable, or what worked, what didn't? Yeah.
I liked how you ended. I liked the little takeaway bubbles you had. Just kind of nicely summarized like the experience for you and how you've grown from it and learned from it. I think that was, I don't know, a really like great way of ending. I don't know.
I was kind of worried that my story might have been like too superficial, like it's just like high school drama. But I had like I went into it like with this idea of like the goal that I wanted people to come out of it with. And did that like translate?
Yeah, well, I think that was kind of like mine too. It's like a guinea pig, like it's something superficial.
Yeah.
And I think it's like kind of just showing that like these little things that happen like can really have deeper meanings and implications in shaping like who we are, like how we interact with others. And so I think that's what I liked about it, because like yeah, like you said, it's teenage drama. You know, a lot of us can relate to that, but then actually like thinking, you know, it's really introspective and kind of showing how we learn and we grow from these misunderstandings that we have. And so I like that.
Yeah, I agree. Like I thought you set up the story nicely. Like your story like kind of very much followed like the Pixar like story spine form. I don't know if you ended up taking a look at those lessons, but like it was kind of a classic Pixar like sequence. So it was like, you know, you set up your context, like your friendship based on shared experience. Like I thought that was like the way you framed that was really good. Like kind of the friendship came out of basically being in proximity and like, you know, having this shared background, but then your interests diverge, so that sets up the climactic moment. And then like I thought you did a nice job connecting, or I at least felt like, you know, your feelings of rejection. I thought that kind of working through your internal state there and communicating it, I thought that was nicely done. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, great job overall. Yeah. Any other comments on Isha's story?
I feel like I like obviously again didn't see it. I'm sorry, I'm gonna watch it. But I think like your comment about it being superficial, like if it meant something to you, then it's not superficial. You know what I mean? Like if you're still thinking about it now, then it's just like if it had a real impact on your life and if it's authentic, then I don't think you should worry about that.
Thanks. That's good to hear.
Cool. Okay. All right. Great. So yeah, so that was that. Yeah, like I said, great job with this assignment and great feedback. We'll do well at least our last 2 stories on Monday and possibly others for students who are participating asynchronously. So we'll start with that on Monday, and then the focus of next week is going to be on data stories. So shifting, like kind of bringing in data, and in particular on like visualizing data. So, you know, without you having necessarily gone through that material yet, I think it's worth thinking about like how this first assignment is going to connect with data storytelling. Like what elements of your stories or how you connect with your audience can you bring in to like kind of quantitative, you know, data visualization type, you know, conveyances of information. So like, you know, one way of doing this is like start thinking about like what sorts of elements of your narratives that you used in this story might apply well or not well to data stories. Or like, what parts of your stories benefited from using visuals to communicate, and then like what's the shared property of those elements that might be useful to apply to data type stories. Yeah, Leia.
I had a question regarding the stories. So it sounds like everyone's stories were kind of first person. The story that I told was actually like third person. It was about like someone who I like kind of know of and look up to a little bit. I haven't added like visuals to the story, so I think it's just a recording right now, but I'll work on visuals over the weekend so we can talk about it on Monday. But I'm wondering, like, is it okay to tell it in third person, or should I rework it to make it like a personal story? Or like from her point of view or something?
No, absolutely. Any narrative style. Yeah. So yeah, everyone this term chose like a first person autobiographical story. But in the past, like if you take a look at last year's stories that I posted on the GitHub page, some people did like, definitely there were third person narratives, and then also like just total fantasy stuff that was not related to life as we know it at all. That's totally fine. So yeah, any of that is fine, and that's for data stories. Often they're in the third person actually, but they don't have to be. Like you could, I've had like students in the past like analyze their Fitbit data, and like that's a first person story. So well, I guess might be a first person story. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, mine's not autobiographical, but I guess it's biographical because it is about someone's life. So
yeah,
yeah,
that's totally, that can definitely be a story. So yeah, that counts. That sounds great. Let's see. Yeah, so like another thing to start thinking about is, so in this first assignment, like your visualizations or visualizations in like kind of concrete stories tend to represent things that exist, either like, I mean, you can tell a fantasy story about a made up place or a made up character, but like the things you draw tend to be pretty literal, in at least within the world of the story. But and so like some data visualizations like photographs are also literal, but mostly data visualizations represent more abstract ideas. Like instead of drawing a happy face, you might like draw a distribution showing how likely a person is to exhibit a particular happiness value or something like that. But so, worth thinking about. Yeah, Nathan.
I was just curious, for this class, are we going to be finding like a lot of our own data or constructing a lot of our own data, or are there like some good like online sites that you would recommend to, like for my story? I was thinking like I'm curious like what like the statistics are on like people who get in like left turn car accidents in maybe like the US. So like where would I go about finding that?
Yeah, so as we go, yeah, so the way this course works is in part one, I'm kind of giving you, well, mostly giving, like I'm mostly giving you data. So in the fourth assignment, you'll find a data set on like coronavirus data. And so like, I have a few recommendations of places to look, but you could find your own data set. But like I've given you the theme. There's a lot of things you could look at, and yeah, well, I mean, we'll talk about that when we get to that assignment. But then in the second part of the course, it's all about finding your own data set. So I have a very long list of potential places to look, but you can like anything that you have access to, which, sorry for the 4-year-old yelling in the background. He's becoming a T-Rex, I think. So very dangerous here. yeah, it could be from your own, the data that you have access to, anything you find on the internet, that's all fair game. So if you find a left turn traffic accidents, left turn data set, traffic accident data set, that's, sorry. Oh my God. 4-year-old is a fun age.
My baby cousin loves T-Rexes. That's like his go-to creature. He does the same.
Yeah, they're fascinating. Okay,
I think that's really cool. I'm excited to like learn like how to find like data and stuff because I'm also like considering doing like QSS minor too. So that's kind of like why I like that. I thought this class would be definitely a good fit.
Yeah, right on. Let's see. Okay, yeah, just a few more things I want to say. So if you, first of all, I know we're like 3 minutes after, so you can catch it on the recording if you need to go. That's totally fine, but I'll just say the last few things. Like, let's see. Narratives in the sense that you like of the stories that you just told for this assignment can be really flexible in terms of like how the universe of your story works. But in data stories, the rules are a little bit less flexible. So it's not that there's like no freedom to tell different stories from the same data. There definitely is, but in order for your data story to be convincing, you kind of have to convey the sense that the rules in your story's universe are the same as the rules in the audience's universe. So like even if the illustrations in a data story are like abstract things like graphs or geometric shapes or things like that, creating a convincing data story means that it should appear very grounded and literal. So there's this complementary relationship between typical narrative stories, like what you just told, and data stories, like what we'll get to next week. Narrative stories are usually about concrete things, but we find them most compelling when they appear to convey abstract thoughts like moral messages or high-level ideas that challenge your worldview and that sort of thing. But data stories are usually about abstract things, but we tend to find them most compelling when they appear to convey very concrete messages. So they're complementary in that way. And then like the most compelling stories about data are really tricky it's really tricky to do this, but if you can, then you can really make an awesome story. You can sometimes find this really tricky balance between like typical narrative stories and typical data stories, where you like present abstract information in a way that feels really grounded and concrete, but that is able to nevertheless fundamentally change how you think about the world. Really tricky to do that. Okay, any thoughts or comments or questions about that kind of spewing of notes there? All right, I'll think about this stuff. So on Monday, we'll finish up our review of our stories, and then we'll go over some strategies for visualizing data, or at least we'll start to get into that. And so to prepare for those discussions, please start going through module 2 of the course material before class on Monday. And then we can start off with any questions you have about that material. So with that, have a lovely weekend and see you all on Monday. Take care, everyone.